And we're live. So, welcome to the interesting Back in My Play hangout where we're going to be talking about Sonic the Hedgehog, among other things, with Greg Sewart of the Player One podcast. Greg, how you doing?
Great.
So you're used to this. You're used to the Google Hangout thing.
Yeah, I was just reminding my wife that we're going to be broadcasting video because she was laying on the couch that's behind me there in her pajamas. It's like, I don't think you want, well, I mean, this is your show, so the world. I don't think you want the world to see.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting to see how it goes because we have live Q&A going, and we're also going to be streaming on YouTube. So if people don't have a Google account, if you're one of the 5% of the people out there that don't have use Gmail or any of that stuff, you can submit questions to @BackInMyPlay on Twitter, or you can just go to your favorite Google website and sign up for a Google account because everyone has your information anyway. So how I want to start this off is really a I'm talking to you because, for better or worse, and we've gone back and forth through email about this, but you're kind of like if I'm making a roster of people who I'm thinking about emailing for episodes, if I'm going to talk about Sega, I figure I should talk to Greg because of Generation 16, and clearly from anyone that listens to the Player One podcast, you are a fan of Sega from the past and present.
A little bit, yeah. Yeah.
So that's not why you're here, but I want to start off by talking to you about Generation 16 because that's one of the my favorite things that you guys do. I love listening to the Player One podcast, but also Generation 16, you put a ton of time and effort into this. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that if people don't remember from it the first time that you were on, and any updates that you have going on with Generation 16.
Sure thing. So Generation 16 is actually inspired by something that a lot of other people are probably familiar with, which is the Nintendo series done by a guy who calls himself Dr. Sparkle. He actually came out with that around the same time that I was considering, wouldn't it be cool now to do sort of a chronological or just chronicle all of the games on the Sega Genesis? Because I feel like like retro games have become a thing now. Obviously, with your podcast is a good example of it. Covering old games is kind of a popular thing to do right now. But generally, especially in North America, when you're covering old games, it's very Nintendo-centric. And there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, I grew up on Nintendo as well. I mean, that's what got me into video games. But I always found that the Sega side of the North American equation has always been very underserved. And you consider what the Genesis did as far as Nintendo's stranglehold on the North American market in the late 80s. So that's what I did. I put together a huge database of all the Genesis games out there and just started a series called Generation 16, which chronicles each Genesis game that's released, Mega Drive game that was released in chronological order. 5 games an episode, and I'm working on episode 12 right now.
Sorry, I'm muting myself as I type furiously to do an update real quick. Yeah, for people that are asking questions, we just had a bunch of people jump on. You can ask questions through the Q&A app that is part of the Google Hangouts, or you can send them to, and just see people doing it right now, you can send it to @BackInMyPlay as well. And that's a great point that you bring up because there are retro podcasts out there. I think Retronauts is really at the top, and whenever Sega has really come up on there, it's always gotten some love, but probably not the love of people that really were passionate about the Sega franchises out there. It was a lot of, the music wasn't as good as the Super Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like it as much. The ports on the Sega Genesis weren't as great, and less focusing on really some very good titles that were on the Sega Genesis that weren't even on the Super Nintendo. A lot of hidden gems that, for me, growing up with the Super Nintendo as my primary platform, I am still discovering now thanks to your videos. So I think it is just going to be great to continue to spread the Genesis love.
Yeah, and the other thing that I really try to cover in the series is not just, going one game to the next sort of in a vacuum, but I try to put it all into context, along with, the environment that the games were released into, also kind of what Sega Japan and Sega of America in particular were doing, and sort of just what the whole atmosphere was in the video game industry, especially on the American side.
Well, talk a little bit about that because you were working in the industry when Sega was still producing video games for a console that they produced. So, I mean, even what was the vibe back then for you? Did you kind of feel like at the, at the major publishers, Sega wasn't getting the love or wasn't getting, the hype for a cover story that a Super Nintendo or later on a PlayStation game would get?
Yeah, I mean, when I really started working in the industry, it was toward the end of Sega as a console manufacturer. It was in the Dreamcast days when I got a real gig. I was doing some fan site stuff before that on the Saturn, but honestly, I couldn't point to any company but Sega as far as them getting out of console manufacturing. The company did its utmost to screw itself out of being a console manufacturer. But I don't know. I mean, I think actually back in the day, when you're talking the 16-bit era, Genesis was getting a lot of love. It took a while because they came into something like Nintendo had like a 95% market share in the U.S. So I mean, if you're an Acclaim or Electronic Arts, well, Electronic Arts is actually a bad example, but if you're an Acclaim or Capcom or Activision or Konami or anybody like that, why would you bother making games for the Genesis? But that's kind of the thing that I cover in the series, and one of the things that I loved about that generation in general is that you watched Sega actually come up from nothing and pull even with Nintendo, and actually, the competition that created not only among the third parties but between those two companies themselves was amazing. It was an amazing time for games.
Well, let's talk about one of the pivotal points in the history of video games when we talk about console wars today being between Microsoft and Sony and Nintendo to a lesser extent. They're kind of looking for their own path to selling some consoles. Back then, it was the Genesis coming out in roughly, I think in America it was 1990?
89. It was 89.
Okay, 89. So at that time, the NES was still out. The Super Nintendo was a couple years away. And like you said, they were trying to make their own market for themselves. One of the big franchises that got them on the map and really got consoles in the house seemed to be Sonic the Hedgehog. Were there any main titles before that besides like the, bring the arcade into your house? Was Sonic the big, first game developed for the Genesis that was a major seller for them?
I mean, it was definitely on a whole other level, but I think before that, that's actually one of the very cool things I think about Sega of America. Like when you're talking about 89, 90, and into 91, like the pre-Sonic generation, basically, the whole bring the arcade home thing was a big deal in Japan. That was kind of how they marketed the Mega Drive in Japan, and it didn't go all that great because they were up against the PC Engine as well as the Famicom. And as far as North America, you got to remember on the NES, I mean, yes, the Genesis was a 16-bit machine, but the NES, there were some heavy hitters coming out in that system in the late 80s and early 90s. I mean, you're talking like Mario 3, you're talking the Mega Man games and the Turtles games and stuff like that. So they still had a major uphill battle, but the thing that Sega of America did that was totally different was they went head-to-head. They started, they had the whole Genesis does what Nintendo don't. Everybody remembers that ad campaign, and that was really bold at the time. That's not something that you saw happen ever. So they were basically saying, like, here's the NES, here's what it looks like, here's the Genesis, it looks better. And then on top of that, what they did in the U.S. that they weren't doing in Japan is they actually went out and started signing a bunch of celebrities to basically endorse a bunch of different games. Like the baseball game that Sega released in Japan as Super League came here as Tommy Lasorda, and the baseball game that Sega released in Japan, or the golf game that Sega released in Japan came here with I'm totally blanking, but a major golf personality. You had Pat Riley, you had Ayrton Senna later on, you had a bunch of big names that they basically, by doing that, they made those people de facto spokespersons for the Genesis, and you actually saw commercials where it was just a montage of all these people like Joe Montana and Michael Jackson talking about how great the Genesis was in this quick, fast, cool commercial. And so before Sonic took them to the next level, but they actually made a dent in this market with that really aggressive marketing campaign with games that were decent. There weren't a lot of really great Genesis games until probably late 1990, but they managed to sell something like 1 million consoles in that first year and a half, which was nothing to sneeze at.
Yeah, if you watch Generation 16, you can see a lot of the games that you cover at the start are the arcade ports, and your Super Thunder Blaze and things like that. Altered Beast was the game that was the first thing that I ever saw on a Sega Genesis, and even that, while we look back on it maybe as kind of a joke, people always make fun of the game. It blew me away at the time, and I was dying to get my hands on something like that. So it worked for me as a, let's see, not even 1990, I was 4 years old. So it worked on my brain to want a Sega Genesis. But what we're gonna do when we have some Q&A stuff coming in right now. So what we will do is sprinkle these in throughout the show. So if you want to start throwing those in there, and we're also getting some more stuff on Twitter, we will do that. So this is a little bit of jumping the gun, but Jim Cole wanted to ask your favorite Sonic stage music of all time. Do you have one?
It's got to be the Green Hill Zone. I mean, it's just such an iconic tune, right? It's when you think Sonic, that's what you think, and so many of us have played. I mean, you pick up Sonic and you play it for a few minutes, you play through the Green Hill Zone, and that is Sonic. So for me, it's got to be that.
Let's jump into another question from George. Greg, what will you do after you finish Generation 16?
I feel like at the speed I'm going, I'm probably going to have to hand Generation 16 off to my kids at some point.
Hey, it's like put it in the will, man.
Yeah, exactly. Now, if I'm able to finish Generation 16, which I really hope I am, I would love to go move on and do Saturn. I really would. I also have a major love for that system. So.
Well, again, something that's really hard to find good footage of, and probably doesn't get the love that it deserves. It was a big. The most I ever heard about the Sega Saturn was the talk of people importing stuff from Japan, just because the support in America probably wasn't as good for the hardcore gamers. Is that right?
Absolutely. I mean, and it's funny that you say that, because that's sort of the love that I have for that system. That was the system that I started importing games on. Me and my friends all did that switch you could install where you had to break some wires and solder a few different wires on to make a switch, and we started importing games like crazy. But it was all because there was like this major power shift at the end of the Genesis through to the Saturn. During the Genesis years, Sega of America had unbelievable freedom to do whatever they wanted, basically. Whereas when we shifted into the Saturn, that was pretty much Sega of Japan taking power back. And I think you could see the result.
Yeah, it sucks. So let's. One thing I wanted to ask you: with Generation 16, are you going to go into the 32X and the Sega CD, since they did kind of push? They were connected to that Genesis in some form. They were kind of on the side or on the top.
Yeah, I'm going to.
Nice.
The 32X and Sega CD are both on the list.
Have fun.
Long road.
So that's one of the questions, and we're going to talk about Sonic in a second. But one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, because I always am toying with the idea of getting a Sega CD, because it has a unique library of games. It has clearly what people will say maybe the best or one of the top 2 or 3 Sonic games that were ever produced, and also it has the classics like Night Trap and other FMV games out there. So with the understanding that every time I look on eBay, it's hard to find a working Sega CD. I think it seems like those things are degrading right now. With that being said, is it worth dropping the money on a Sega CD? And if so, what are some of the games that, if I did invest in one, these are the games you have to check out, whether they're good or whether they're just important to the Sega CD experience?
Sure. I mean, I saw this. Saw somebody ask this question earlier as well, and I kind of ran down a quick list. It actually ended up longer than I expected. But just to run through, I mean, you got Sonic CD, you've got Snatcher, which is a Hideo Kojima game, which people would know from Metal Gear. It's a digital novel. Also, the only way you could play that game in English was on the Sega CD. In fact, it was only released in America on the Sega CD. It never actually came out in Japan. Batman Returns is fantastic, especially for the driving stages and the music. Earthworm Jim Special Edition on the Sega CD. Echo the Dolphin, Final Fight CD, Flashback, Jaguar XJ220 is a great racing game. My favorite version of Jurassic Park was on the Sega CD. It's actually a point-and-click adventure game. The Lunar RPGs, two of the best RPGs in the 16-bit years. The best version of NHL 94, as far as I'm concerned. Then you got the full motion video. You said Night Trap, which it's not a good game, but you kind of got to play it. Sewer Shark, kind of along the same lines. Road Avenger is awesome. Prize Fighter is probably the best full motion video game out there. Robo Alesta for a shooter. Shining Force CD. Age 3 Thunderstrike. Core made a lot of really good games on the Sega CD as well, and that's probably the best one they made. It's a 3D helicopter sim. So there's a lot of good games out there to grab. You gotta experiment. You gotta take chances on the Sega CD. But I'm personally crazy about that system. It's got a good library. You just the crap is really crap. Like there's kind of a big gulf between what's good and what's terrible on that system.
I left a copy of while they were at GDC. I left a copy of Night Trap for the Japanese Sega CD at the A4 offices. I'm hoping that they head down and to the local used shops, pick up a Sega CD or find like a CDX or something like that to play that thing on. But it's still a classic in the sense of it is still referenced whenever anyone talks about a Sega CD, they talk about the Night Traps and the Sewer Sharks, and even the only thing I remember playing on a Sega CD at my friend's house was NBA Jam, which it felt super close to arcade quality, but again, that was coming from playing it on the Super Nintendo.
Yep, for sure. I mean, in Night Trap, you go back to that, like all the ESRB ratings you see on your video games today, you can trace that directly back to Night Trap.
Literal historical importance right there. Yep. Okay, so the main thing that we were going to do this hangout for was to talk about Sonic the Hedgehog, because obviously we did an episode on it this past weekend, and not immediately after that, I think it was a day after, you were starting to drop some knowledge on me in terms of like really what the whole development process was for Sonic the Hedgehog and what the goal was for Sega when it came to creating this character. So I would love to kind of hand it off to you for a little bit and just talk a little bit about the stuff that you mentioned in that email.
Sure. Well, I mean, probably the key thing to know about Sonic, which is pretty common knowledge now, but you mentioned earlier that, Sega was bringing the arcade home with the Genesis, and then over here they after the sports genre, which worked out really well for them. But I don't think there didn't seem to be any illusions about the fact that they needed something to battle Mario, which is exactly what Sonic was. Although the character came after the idea to create a game to battle Mario, and it was basically something that was called Project Million Seller internally. And what Sega did, Sega of Japan put out the word that they were looking for a mascot that could take on Mario. And what ultimately got chosen was actually a character created by Naoto Oshima, who did create Sonic the Hedgehog, but it was a rabbit. So Sega actually decided to pick a rabbit character. And they went to Yuji Naka, who was a programmer who'd been with Sega for years. He'd done Master System games and things like that. He had just come off completing the Ghouls and Ghosts port for the Genesis, which was fantastic. It was really well done. So they basically went to him and gave him the option to create this game that was going to beat Mario. And he was a big Mario fan based on interviews that I've read. He basically said that at the time he was playing Mario and he loved it, but he wished that he could finish the game faster. He wanted to go faster. Apparently a big car fan and stuff like that too. So the two of these guys got together and they created a game. And Naka had created an engine that could run really quick, really fast, make the fastest game you'd ever played, that sort of thing. And they started building a game around this rabbit character. The problem that they ended up having, one of the one of the play mechanics was that the rabbit was going to be able to grab things with his ears and throw them back at enemies, which when you're making a game where the idea is to go really fast, that really broke the flow. And the other thing that Nako was really keen on was making simple gameplay, single button gameplay. So the team at this point, one of the main players was also Hirokazu Yasuhara. They were all in there. They were all working on it together, and basically decided, okay, this rabbit character is not going to work, and they whittled down more choices to an armadillo and a hedgehog, deciding that if they were going to have single button gameplay, that would mean that the jump would also have to double as an attack. So they needed an animal that would naturally be able to attack while it was jumping. So they considered, okay, roll into a ball. You look at an armadillo, obviously armored skin, that would work. Or you look at a hedgehog, which was another character that Oshima had done a sketch on earlier, and that would work because of the spikes. They ultimately settled on a hedgehog because it was more aggressive. Hedgehog had spikes, so it could be an attack. Armadillo, when it rolls up, it's defending itself, basically, was the thinking. So they switched it up, and they went with the hedgehog. And based on some interviews that I read recently, they didn't actually tell Sega that they went with a hedgehog at first. They just started building the game around him. But received unanimous support when they finally showed their bosses what they were doing. And that was basically, as far as I understand it, through the different research I've done, how the story goes. It was a game that was meant to destroy Mario. They needed to do something. Back then, and I don't know if people really realize this nowadays, but back then, all these companies were looking for mascots. Everybody wanted their own Mario. Konami had Rocket Knight. Sunsoft tried it with Aero the Acrobat. There was just a bunch. You get tons of these little animal-based character platforming games, and the whole idea was that somebody was trying to hit on their next Mario, and this was Sega's attempt.
Apologies for the pausing and the muting. I think my dishwasher is a little bit too loud for the microphone. But yeah, a couple of things that really stood out to me when I was doing research for the episode was the advertising, the way Sonic was advertised to gamers seemed to be almost not revolutionary, but it was totally different than the way other companies were doing ads. Later on, we saw more extreme, like 1994, like extreme ads, and like this is the most extreme game that you're ever going to play. But back in 1991, seeing things in GamePro or EGM where the ads were set up where Sonic was going so fast, he was so crazy that it actually you had to buy 4 pages of advertising to actually advertise for Sonic the Hedgehog. So was there anything that stood out for you when it came to the advertising? Do you remember anything that was particularly crazy or inventive when it came to trying to sell Sonic to kids?
Well, it wasn't just Sonic so much for me, but we were just talking about the way that Sega sort of tackled the NES with the Genesis, where they basically said, "Here's a 16-bit system. You put it side by side. It does, it looks 10 times better, and it's got all these arcade games." And then you went into the sports games and stuff like that. And it's funny because when the Super Nintendo came out, for all intents and purposes, there's no way that the Genesis was going to win a head-to-head comparison with the Super Nintendo, right? It had better music, it had much more colors, it had, I think, a better resolution, it had Mario, so it had all this stuff that Sega really couldn't compete with. And I think it was a stroke of genius and pure luck as well that they happened to be creating a game that was extremely fast, because that was pretty much the only thing the Genesis really had over the Super Nintendo was the clock speed. And who the hell's going to know what you're talking about when you say, we have a faster clock speed, right? But they took it and they ran with it, and basically for the next 2 years, the advertising was, we're faster. Our games are faster. Look at Sonic. The screen can't even keep up with him. He's so fast, right? And it stuck, and it sold, and it worked. And that, along with packing Sonic in and having a lower price point, too. So, I mean, it wasn't just Sonic, but he was the linchpin in all that. They went from the sports games and the 16-bit versus 8-bit to speed, pure speed. If you put stills side by side, 9 times out of 10, the Super Nintendo version of anything is going to look better. But get them running, Sonic is super fast, Super Nintendo can't do this.
The main focus of Back in My Play is the personal story. So I would love to ask you what was your first experience with Sonic the Hedgehog? When was the first time that you uh, got you started to notice it? Were you at the launch of the Sega Genesis on day one, and this was just the next release for you?
No, I was a Nintendo kid. My brother and I got an NES in the mid '80s, and I was crazy for the Nintendo. And I was a subscriber to Nintendo Power and all that stuff, poured over every page. And I was dying for the Super Nintendo. I wanted the Super Nintendo so bad, and it was taking too long. The Genesis, like I was buying other magazines as well, EGM and GamePro and stuff like that. And it's like these Nintendo games are awesome, but man, did the Genesis games look good. And I actually ended up renting the system not too long before Sonic came out, and Super Monaco GP was the game that sold me actually on the Genesis. I love that game so much. I'm a big racing fan that I ended up buying it based on that. And I knew Sonic was coming, and it looked really cool. I actually bought the system a month before they packed Sonic in. So yeah, and they dropped the price, so I was a bit of a sucker there, but I just had to have the thing right away. But then Sonic came out, and I bought it, and it was, I mean, it was unreal. It was like nothing else.
It all worked out.
Yeah, I was happy.
Were there any at the time in America or even in North America? Were there any Sega Genesis themed magazines? I remember just always getting my coverage because I'd never knew like about EGM until like 2001 because I was just under this. I just somehow started subscribing to GamePro, and we obviously had Nintendo Power, so I was getting all my Sega Genesis info from GamePro. Was there anything out there dedicated for the Sega Genesis?
Yeah, there was. Sega itself actually put out its own version of a Nintendo Power style magazine called Sega Visions. That started in 1990. It sort of fluctuated between like a quarterly and a bi-monthly magazine. It kind of just came out whenever, and it was a marketing rag. But you got a little bit of inside knowledge, and you got a little bit of early scoop on things, like when they signed Joe Montana early in 1990. They were talking about it in Sega Visions, the first issue of Sega Visions, that it was coming out, and you're getting a look at like Michael Jackson's Moonwalker and stuff like that. That was the era that Sega Visions really happened. I think it lasted right up till around the beginning of the Saturn, so it lasted probably 4 or 5 years. Outside of that, I remember Sendai, the EGM people, doing Mega Play, but that was sporadic as well. They did console specific one-offs all the time. I forget what they called the Super Nintendo magazine, but Mega Play was the one that they did. So I bought a couple issues of that, but outside of that, no, there really wasn't a ton of big Sega coverage. For me, the magazine that really covered Sega well was Game Fan. They were hardcore Sega nerds to the point that it was actually a little ridiculous. But if you were into the Genesis and the Sega CD in particular, you waited every month for Game Fan because they were going to have all the information and they were going to gush over it like nobody's business. So that was pretty much, for me, that was the Sega magazine.
I miss being able to think that there were just so many. I guess now there are blogs. I guess there's all the different outlets for whether it's IGN or what it was, One Up or Kotaku or Joystick. That there doesn't seem to be a. I guess there aren't really console themed blogs except like Nintendo World Report. I don't know where I'm really going with this. I guess I'm just saying, like, I miss like those console specific magazines. I got in really late with Official Dreamcast magazine, but every single month I got that, I was locked into that magazine, and you got the great demo disc when they were starting to do that. This is just me being a little bit nostalgic, unfortunately.
Those magazines were great though, because you got to kind of live in your bubble. I mean, like you were well, what for the Dreamcast, you were in your teens, right?
Yeah, 13.
So, yeah, I mean, I was in my early 20s, but I had the same sort of experience with like the Super Nintendo and the Genesis and things like that, where, you on the playground, man, it was one or the other. You were Nintendo or you were Sega, and when you got these magazines, you got to pour over it, and you got to kind of revel in the Genesis, or you got to revel in the Super Nintendo or with Nintendo Power. It's like, nothing else exists outside of the Nintendo bubble, and it's just 100 pages of, oh my god, look at all these great screenshots and all these cool games coming. I loved it. I mean, I miss the monthly magazines, but they couldn't exist the way they did then because information flows so freely and so quickly now that it would never be the same as getting that magazine every month and poring over every page and looking at every screenshot really closely. It just doesn't happen.
Yeah, it seems so much more fun back then. I don't know.
Yeah, I thought it was.
Yeah, it seems like today it is a sometimes things leak, but it's so I guess it was really PR focused back then too. The PR, people had a lot of control over when things came out with embargoes.
You were blissfully unaware about it.
Exactly, and now you just hear things about. Like now the big news story is like the embargo is going to be lifted on this game in 10 days. Get really hyped up. What are they going to show for coverage and things like that? Where again, you just got a cover of a magazine. You saw it was Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. You knew that you needed to know everything about this. You needed to know all the moves. So when you eventually went into the arcade, you didn't just waste at that time 50 cents, like 2 quarters to play friggin' Ultimate Mortal Kombat 3. But again, those were just the days that I really miss. We got some questions. I'm gonna start throwing some your way. At least we got some comments, I should say, from Sean697. This is kind of weird. If you're posting them on YouTube, they're actually getting emailed to me. So you can post comments if you're watching the YouTube version of the stream as well, and I will do my best to ask those. Looks like Sean was a subscriber to Mega Play, says made by Sendai's, also EGM. So I guess that is a couple minutes old. And he says, oh, and definitely get a Sega CD. Do it. Sewart can lead you to the good games.
I just tried to, yeah.
It's pressure, man. Let's see. Marvin Bruck on Twitter. Also, this is another way you can ask questions. If you want to just submit them to @BackInMyPlay, I can grab them off there as well. He said, on a scale of, that's a weird question, on a scale of 13.6 to 57, how awesome was the music in Sonic? It's pretty awesome.
58.
It's totally a 58. It was one of the things that I really gained more respect for were the songs in the later stages of Sonic, because a lot of times you go and revisit Sonic today, like you mentioned at the top of the show, it is you go and you kind of play Green Hill Zone, and you get the nostalgic juices flowing. You're like, oh, yep, this is Sonic, this is what I remember, this is great. And there is so much great music towards the end of the games that a lot of people might not hear, or they may not even remember, because when they do go back to it, Sonic's on everything today. Whenever like I literally am looking around in my room, I have Sonic on a cart, I have it on my PlayStation Vita, I have it on my PSP now, I have it on the PlayStation 3 via download, and with the Sonic's Ultimate Genesis Collection, it is all over the place. So I don't know where I'm going with that either, unless I'm losing my train of thought. Maybe because it's like almost 9 o'clock. I don't know.
Way past bedtime?
No, I just gave up my caffeine a little bit too early today.
You're right. I mean, that was just one of the other things that they did absolutely right with Sonic. I mean, it was the music is on a whole other level. It's Sega did good music in a lot of their games. I mean, you look at something like Outrun, and the music in that game is fantastic. But yeah, the music in the first Sonic and the second Sonic, I forget. You probably know this better than I do. The name of the composer was a member of a band.
Yeah, I can. Yeah, sorry, I am losing track off the top of my head, but I can pull it up as I have my outline in front of me from the other episode. One of the things I wanted to ask you while I'm looking that up, what are there any solid facts to the whole Michael Jackson working on Sonic 3 and Knuckles? Is there any concrete information that we know he did some stuff for that?
I spoke to somebody who backed that up, but okay. That interview's never been published.
Okay.
So I can't go any further than that. But even then, the backup was that they thought that was the case.
Okay.
So yeah.
The composer was Masato Nakamura, and
yes.
Again, his claim to fame was being a member in the J-pop band Dreams Come True. which I'm sure was very popular.
which they went on tour at the end of 1990, and the way that tour was announced was using Sonic.
What?
The first time the character was unveiled in a magazine was in a like a Sega newsletter of some sort in Japan,
Hmm.
and Dreams Come True's tour was starting, and it was announced with Sonic. They used Sonic to announce it. He was on the tour bus. They did a mock interview with the character in that magazine. I think the next issue. That was Sonic's debut.
Another thing that really bugs me about not being from Japan or living in Japan is that they released for the anniversary a 2-disc collection that included the soundtrack for Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, and also a whole separate CD with unreleased beta music where you can listen to some tracks that are a little bit slowed down. You can see they fine-tune some of these tracks to fit the game a little bit better with its high speed, but you can find it if you know where to find stuff that is not for sale. Because if you want to
On the
go,
internet?
I tried. Yeah, I tried to look and see if I could get a retail copy, but you're talking about close to $100. Like
Good
every
Lord.
soundtrack that came out in Japan, everything is like $100 now. So it's worth listening to, and you can just listen to the tracks on YouTube if you really want to.
The other thing is too, for anybody who likes that old Sonic music, the Sonic Generations soundtrack,
Yeah.
because they did remixes and updates on a lot of the. I mean, they did Green Hill Zone and then the Chemical Plant Zone as well, which is also another great track. And the remixes are pretty damn good on that as well.
That's a game that I need to finish. It's
You
still
do.
something I also own on 2 platforms for some reason because that makes a lot of sense. Let's continue going through some of the questions. Again, we have a couple of people just jumping on right now. If you want to submit questions, you can go to that Q&A box in the Google Hangout if you're on there, or you can submit a comment if you're watching on YouTube. The final way to do it is to go to @BackInMyPlay on Twitter, and I will keep an eye on that as well. So another thing that I want to talk to you a little bit about, Greg, was the importance of Sonic for the success of the Genesis, because you started off the show talking about how Sega was doing all right with that. Sega does was what Nintendo don't. They had a lot of great arcade ports on there. They had some great sports games. They had the names of the celebrities and things like that. But how important was Sonic when it came to the Genesis actually being a success in, let's just say, the western part of the world?
I think honestly, without Sonic, the Genesis doesn't even crack like 15% market share in North America, because I mean that game was the catalyst for so many things. It was a huge seller here. Actually, I believe it was a bigger seller in North America than it was in Japan. And it just blew the doors wide open, not only as far as getting third parties involved because the system was selling so well, but also even getting the North American development arm of Sega up and running. I mean, STI, I don't know if Sega Technical Institute was happening before or after Sonic was released. I believe it was before. It was headed by Mark Cerny, who people probably know right now because of the PlayStation 4. But, I mean, they would not have gotten the power they got if the Genesis wasn't doing so well in North America, and the Genesis wouldn't have done as well in North America if it wasn't for Sonic. That's really the long and short of it.
I need to address the whole Game Gear subject because Sonic had a really weird life on the Game Gear. I guess it was used to sell Game Gears because they used Sonic 2 as a pack-in, and I think Sonic 1 was also used as a pack-in at the beginning. But Sonic had a real up and down life on the Game Gear. Sonic 1 seemed to be great. Sonic 2 was kind of garbage, and I remember getting Sonic Triple Trouble and it being awesome. So I was just wondering, any thoughts on Sonic's adventures on the Game Gear?
I didn't play a ton of that because I never had a Game Gear, but I do know that I remember you talking about that on the last episode of Back in My Play, and the thing that really explains that away is the developers. The first game, I believe, was developed by Ancient, which was Yuzo Koshiro's company, or I don't know if it was his company, but he was involved. He did a lot of the music in that game as well. The second game, I don't know. The second and third games, I don't know who they were developed by, but I know that the group that did the second game, I don't think they ever did another Sonic game, and the group that did the third game, I want to say it was Dimps, maybe, or anyway, they ended up doing a bunch of the Sonic games after that. So it's not surprising that you remember them that way, because yeah, it's pretty common knowledge that the second game was garbage, but the third game it just kind of got better and better. And apparently after that, like the Tales game that came out, they all got better and better for a while there.
Right. I totally forgot about that.
Hmm.
Jeez, and unfortunately, Game Gears today, if you pick one up, they are really hit and miss in terms of the screens actually being viewable because of the backlight kind of degrading over time. So,
Oh, really?
yeah, 3S is where you're gonna have to hit that stuff up, and thankfully they do have that stuff on there if you want to. Don't buy Sonic 2 on the Game Gear because I'm sure it's all the stuff for the Game Gear games are reasonably priced on the 3DS. I think they're only like $4 too.
Yeah, something like that.
So it's definitely worth checking out. Sonic the Hedgehog. It's really obviously the Master System version, and Triple Trouble. The bad thing about all this stuff is when the Master System was gigantic in countries like Brazil, that's what they got for Sonic 2. That's a huge bummer. Those guys really did not win the lottery with that.
I think because of Brazil, the Master System was like one of the longest running consoles in history.
Right?
Yeah, I think they were selling it in Brazil up to like 98 or 99.
So let's continue to talk a little bit more about Sonic, because literally a little bit over a year later, Sonic 2 came hot and heavy. You had Sonic Tuesdays, and obviously a lot of hype built up with it because Sonic 1 was such a big hit, and Sega was really betting, at least it seems like they're really betting hard on Sonic 2 to be the big holiday push for the Sega Genesis. So I was wondering if you had any thoughts on just really Sonic 2 in general, and maybe if that had any more, if that was any more important than the original Sonic the Hedgehog for the Genesis's success.
I think you could say it's more important because I think it's the best-selling Genesis game of all time. It was the one that, I mean, Sonic broke the doors open, but the Sonic 2 opened the floodgates. But the thing that interests me more about Sonic 2 is actually the story behind the development of that is like just as dramatic as the first one, because the way the story goes is that before Sonic 1 was done, Mark Cerny was setting up Sega Technical Institute. And Mark Cerny, like I said, people know him right now because of the PS4, but he's been around a long time. He worked at Atari when he was very young. He created Marble Madness in the arcade. And after that, he actually went to Sega of Japan. He worked in Sega of Japan. He's actually the guy who was the catalyst for the 3D glasses on the Master System. And he worked with Yuji Naka while he was there in Japan on Master System games. So anyway, he was back in the U.S. He was creating this American branch that ended up being called the Sega Technical Institute, and his vision for that was to bring in raw talent, American talent, so that they would bring like a Western sensibility to the game development at Sega, but to temper them with veterans from Japan, so that they could kind of learn from each other. The veterans could learn sort of the Western sensibilities, and these raw kids that were programming out of the U.S. could learn their craft from the masters from Japan. And apparently he'd already convinced Yasuhara to move to the U.S. in San Francisco to be part of the Sega Technical Institute. Anyway, Sonic came out. It was a huge hit, and apparently Yuji Naka was still getting crap from management in Japan about the fact that the game didn't actually meet its deadline. The game came out later than it was supposed to. And he quit. He quit over it. He left Sega. When Cerny heard this, he apparently went to Naka and said, "Don't quit, come to America, and we'll make games over here at Sega Technical Institute, and you'll have a lot more autonomy and power and control over what you're doing." So he did. He decided to come over. So, of course, Cerny had put together 2 of the 3-person team that everyone considered Sonic Team. Yasuhara and Naka were both in the U.S. Oshima was still in Japan. And apparently what happened after that was Cerny went to Sega and said, "Okay, so you want Sonic 2?" At which point Sega said, "No, it's too early. We don't need another one." 2 months later, apparently, they came back and said, "We really need Sonic 2 for the next holiday season." So it was like a 9-month cycle. So this is where Sega Technical Institute slash Sonic Team US sort of was created, and so that also explains why if you look at Sonic 2, I'm not going to say it's an uneven experience, but it's definitely a different experience. I mean, the base mechanics are still the same, but I find, especially with the art and the level design, it's certain levels are like a dramatic departure from what Sonic 1 was, and I chalk that up personally to the American influence on Sonic Team for the second game. And personally, I'm a bigger fan of the first Sonic game. Sonic 2 is really good. I like Sonic 1 a lot better. I was playing it again last night after you and I spoke about doing this tonight, and I do dig Sonic 2, but yeah, I'm a bigger Sonic 1 fan.
Sorry, I was going to say I don't. We don't have to hit on this too hard. You guys talked about it on the Player One podcast. I think it was 2 weeks ago, but we mentioned it on the episode last week because it was part of the news cycle with Sonic the Hedgehog. Yeah, I'm sorry, I have to kind of bring this up. But there was an article written for The Guardian, more or less saying that Sonic the Hedgehog, those games were actually never good, and it's not just in hindsight. Even back then, they were bad. I did some serious research, and I looked on Metacritic, and those games did all right. I mean, they got in the high 80s and whatever. I don't know how Metacritic is really getting these ratings from way back then. I'm sure they're getting their EGMs and their Game Pros and stuff like that. But I mean, I have to ask you, it's really hard to justify that argument just based off the fact of how successful the games were and how still we're talking 23-ish years later, there's still 1 or 2 Sonic games coming out every year. So if people didn't get to listen to that episode of Player One Podcast, I recommend you go check it out. But I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about your thoughts on that, just because, again, it is kind of a hot topic right now.
Sure. I mean, it speaks to a larger issue that I have with a lot of the editorials that happen nowadays. It's like, when you're talking about older games, there to me, a lot of revisionism tends to happen. And I mean, to a point, it's legitimate. Like, you can look back at, say, something like Mortal Kombat, the first Mortal Kombat, and you can easily debate that was not a good game, right? But I have an issue with people who take the opinion of, I didn't like this game, to say the game was never good. It's two different things, and I really don't like it when someone tells me that I shouldn't have enjoyed something. Like, especially a video game. It's the same thing with, like I said, with Mortal Kombat. And you have to take it in the context of its time. Sonic did things that weren't being done. It was a new character. It's so funny now because it was edgy and it was mature, and you look back at the way Sonic looked in '91, and he looks like a kiddie cartoon. I mean,
Yep.
He doesn't look edgy or mature at all, especially compared to how he looks now.
He's no tier 1 operator.
Exactly. But it's just like, I don't know. I had an issue with that article, just more because I don't know how you take, basically, again, the best-selling game on the Genesis, say it was never good. One of the highest-rated series on the Genesis, or in the 16-bit era in general, say they were never good. You're talking millions of sales. You're talking a series that has continued on. It spawned cartoon shows, and Sonic was more popular than Mickey Mouse. It was more popular than Mario for a time. I mean, you can't go back and say the games were never good. That's bull. But one of the things I think you guys touched on really well in your recent episode on Back in My Play was the whole idea of momentum. And I find that there's 2 main complaints that people who say the Sonic games were never good have. One is that you push right to win, which is bull.
Total bull crap, man.
Once you get past, I'll admit, it's a product of the first level of the first game, right? Mm-hmm. Which you can do that in the first few levels of the first game in Green Hill Zone, more or less. I mean, it's not that simple, but you are going as fast as you can to the right, and you can get through without doing a whole lot of the platforming. And the fact that Sega sold those games on that fact, because I mean, they sold how fast it was. They always showed Green Hill Zone. In Sonic 2, they sold how fast it was. They always showed Chemical Plant Zone, which is the zone that you don't need to worry too much because you have these super fast areas where Sonic leaves the screen and all that stuff. But it's not true. it's never been true about at least the first 3 games. Later on, they kind of started going in that direction. I found, especially with some of the portable games. Um, the other thing is that I think people wanted it to be Mario. I think the fact that Sega came out to try to beat Mario, and they were very vocal about the fact that the game was meant to beat Mario, in some people's minds meant it had to be Mario, which is wrong. It's completely wrong. The physics of it are totally different. And Josh mentioned on your show the idea of momentum, and that's what Sonic is built on. Sonic cannot run straight up a hill from a standing start. He can't do it. That's the way the game is built. That doesn't make it bad. You might not like it, but it's different. If they come out and tried to create Mario, they would have failed, because Nintendo does Mario better than probably anyone ever could. And they created a different feel for their game, and I think it was a success. But it has everything to do with momentum, and if you don't get that, you're not going to like the game, and that's fine. But I'm not a fan of saying it was never good.
Yeah, I played through both games to completion, and that was the big thing that stood out for me was you actually had to master the physics of the game to be able to play it. You can't. That is the worst way to go into it, is expecting Mario physics, because
Right.
you're going to die a lot, and you're not going to be able to finish the game, and that is just a horrible way to go into it. I'm playing I'm playing Yoshi's Island right now, which is like a stark contrast to Sonic the Hedgehog 1 and 2, and you could even say, man, going into Yoshi's Island, this is super boring.
Which was how Sega was marketing the whole thing back in the day, right?
I think it's still working on me.
But Yoshi's Island is an amazing game.
Oh, I'm having a blast. Like it's probably the most charming game I've ever played. But
Right.
It's just, man, arguments on the internet. It just sounded like a forum debate thing, which bums me out. You can actually go and get a hold of Mark Cerny on Twitter at Mark Cerny PS4. That looks like it's his official one, and ask him to do a remake of Streets of Rage 2, because
I'd be okay with that.
yeah, I just want to not like a nicer, I want a Double Dragon Neon version of Streets of Rage 2. I think that would be sick.
There's a game that people didn't understand, and I was one of them. Double Dragon Neon. I hated that game the first time I played it.
Oh, but you like it now.
Oh my god, I love it.
It's so great.
I downloaded it, not to keep completely off Sonic here, but I downloaded it and played it single player, and I put it down. I'm like, this is garbage. I can't believe I spent any money on this. And then I was over to a buddy's place, and he had it, and he was going up and down about it. I'm like, that's terrible. Why do you like it? And no. Grab a controller. We're playing.
Yeah.
And we went through the whole game, and I'm like, this is one of the greatest beat 'em ups I've ever played.
Yeah, still, I had the same exact problem. I tried the demo, didn't like it. I got it on PlayStation Plus for free, and immediately had. I think I made it. It's a hard game by yourself.
Yeah,
You need to have a
is.
buddy over to play it. That's probably the big thing that was bugging me at the beginning. But the soundtrack is incredible, and all the little mixtapes that you can pick up are just hilarious.
Yeah.
Like you won't. It is a game made for people, whether you grew up playing Double Dragon or not. I really hope that the guys that made that game are able to go on and remake a couple other games, just because it is the retro remakes that's the kind of retro remake that I want to see. Not so much just a up-resed version or a smoothed out version of a game that I already own on 18 different platforms.
Right.
So yeah, we'll start wrapping things up. We're about 45 minutes in. I think that's a good time to cap this off. For people, if you guys are digging this stuff, I'll try to do a couple more of these, and this will be in our iTunes feed for Back in My Place. You can get a little bit. If 2.5 hours of Sonic was not enough, here's an extra 45 minutes of Sonic the Hedgehog. But before we get going, the last thing I want to ask you is Sonic past the Genesis has kind of been hit and miss. I'm one of the people that I'm one of the I don't know, I guess the few people these days that liked Sonic Adventure at least, and got me to buy a Sega Dreamcast. But a lot of people out there ever since Sonic went 3D and more open world, not side-scrolling. Things have fallen apart. Are there any of the 3D games that you would recommend out there to people? Are there any that you would say, hey, you know what? Actually, you should pick this up. You should give it a shot. It's still a really good game.
I was a big fan of Sonic Adventure. I feel like if you go back to it now, it's a little bit harder to play. Kind of the way any 3D game really is. I mean, one of the only early 3D console games that really stands the test of time is Mario 64. Nintendo somehow got that right from the start, and I don't know how they did it. But like you look at things like Sonic Adventure or something like Tomb Raider, which Tomb Raider for me played fine when it came out. Now it's a clunky mess to play. But not to get off topic too much, I loved Sonic Adventure. Sonic Adventure 2 was okay, except they took they took too much time away from Sonic and had you playing a lot of shooting and scavenger hunt levels. Other than that, honestly, I have not been a fan of much of anything outside of Sonic Generations.
You don't revisit Shadow the Hedgehog, every year?
Oh gosh, Shadow the Hedgehog.
Just do a quick playthrough?
Yeah.
Did you have to review that or anything like that?
I did actually, yeah. I couldn't
crap.
play what I gave it, but I know I didn't like it. That game was done basically because they wanted to add shooting. People had been begging. Apparently, they said they got a lot of mail begging them to add shooting to Sonic, but they couldn't give Sonic a gun. They didn't feel okay with that, so they decided to give Shadow a gun instead.
That makes so much sense.
And the other thing that I really haven't, and Sonic Adventure started this. One of the other things that I don't know if a lot of people know, but the original backstory for the first Sonic was supposed to be him going after his girlfriend, I believe. His girlfriend was somebody named Madonna. And I'm not making this up. It was a human woman named Madonna, and Sonic was in a band. That was the big thing. That there's two different stories. I forget the name of the marketing woman at Sega of America, but at Sega of America, they basically killed that story. They said they saw the whole beast human love thing, and it's like that's not going to fly here.
If they only waited for the internet. When the
exactly.
internet came out, now there's whole communities for that stuff.
And Yuji Naka has since gone on record saying, no, we killed it before it ever got to the U.S. anyway. But yeah, so there was this whole sort of Sonic has a human girlfriend aspect that I was so glad they went away from, because the first few Sonic games, he's in his own world, right? Like everything's cutesy and there's little animals jumping around and robots. Dr. Robotnik might be human, but he's obviously not. But then with Sonic Adventure, suddenly Sonic's back in a human world again, and it just kind of snowballed from there. And it's a direction I've never liked seeing the series go. With like Sonic 2006 was one of the worst examples of it. With the whole, I think there was a kiss scene at the end. I can't remember, but yeah, that's one of the things. They feel like they've really lost their way in a lot of ways with that series. Generations made me happy, and some of the portable games have been really good. The Sonic Advance games were fun. Sonic Pocket Adventure on the Neo Geo Pocket was good. But in Sonic Rush as well. But yeah, it's been way too hit and miss. I've long since gotten past the point where I'll buy a game because Sonic's on the cover.
So how do you feel about Sonic Boom coming out? I think it's coming out this fall.
I'll give it a chance because it's a new development group, but I'm definitely not crazy about those character designs.
Yeah, that's probably the oddest. I mean, it looks like a cartoon for kids, and clearly they're also making a cartoon for kids.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, what's the worst that can happen? We always have our, 18 versions of Sonic 1, 2, and 3 and CD on everything that we own. How many copies of Sonic 1 do you think you own?
Oh my God.
If you had to just guess off the top of your head, you
probably
obviously.
A dozen.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's more than me.
Yeah. It's too many.
Did you ever play it on the iPod?
No, I never had a clicky iPod. Ethan Einhorn, I know you mentioned it back in my play.
Oh, yeah.
As a friend, and I remember the day he got it for his old iPod and tried to tell me that it was playable. I didn't believe him.
He was selling that hard at the time. I remember hearing him on something being like, "Oh yeah, it's like pixel perfect. We got it down."
I'm sure it looked gorgeous, but yeah, playing with that wheel, no thanks.
We got one more question before we let you go, because this is a game I don't know a lot about. Sean wanted to know, what are your thoughts on Sonic R on the Saturn? and why we never got a true Sonic game on the Sega Saturn.
Um, well, we never got a true Sonic game on the Sega Saturn. I think it had everything to do with that rift that was growing between Sega of America and Sega of Japan. Um, there was obviously, wow, I'm totally blanking on the name, but there was Sonic Extreme
Yeah.
under development at Sega Technical Institute, which I think got killed right around the same time that Sega Technical Institute got folded back into Sega proper. But there are stories if you go back to Sonic 2 on the Genesis. Um, a lot of bad blood between the American and Japanese developers on that team, and a lot of accusations of, there were like 4 or 5 levels that got cut from that game. The Hidden Palace Zone being the one that everybody knows about. And most times you'll hear the American developers saying, like, yeah, we realized that cuts had to be made for time and space and everything, but it always seemed like it was the American stuff that was getting cut. And I think once you saw, Naka went back to Sega of Japan after that as well, and I think when the power started to shift, I'm curious if Sonic Extreme ever really even had a chance. Yeah. So there was that. I think also they were working on something like a Sonic Adventure for the Saturn, if I'm not mistaken, but the system was killed and the Dreamcast came out, and it was ported over to the Dreamcast as sort of its selling point. Sonic R, I loved Sonic R.
What's the selling point of Sonic R? Obviously, it's from what I remember, it's just like Sonic and his friends running really fast, right?
That's all it is. It's a racing game.
Okay.
But the thing is that it's not. I mean, there are prescribed tracks and you have to do laps and everything, but there were tons of different directions you could go on the tracks. You didn't have to stay right on the course. You could run around. So it kind of had this sort of strange platforming sensibility, kind of like the Sonic games have always had. Because I mean, that one of the nice things, especially of the Genesis games, is like there isn't one path through the level. In fact, especially with Sonic 2, there's a lot of verticality in those levels, and you guys were talking about on Back in My Play where you wanted to stay up high so you didn't have to worry about a lot of the dangers on the ground. And they kind of shifted that sensibility into this 3D racing game with Sonic R, which is one of the things I loved about it. That and the soundtrack was incredibly goofy and just amazing. Still one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. The game's really hard to play now. It's kind of hard to take. It doesn't look very good. It's really loose is the best way to describe it. Like, it doesn't feel like the characters are reacting to your input as well as they should. But back when it came out, maybe I was just starved for a Sonic game, but I was crazy about that game. I loved it. The atmosphere in it was so goofy and silly that I just couldn't help but love it.
Yeah, I think it was. Wasn't it ported to? Oh, yeah, it was ported. Was it ported to Xbox Live and PSN or something like that?
I think so. Yeah, it was on PC as well.
Okay, maybe
So I
that's
think it
what
was
it
the
was.
PC version. Usually, when you saw those ports to Xbox and PSN, it was like the PC version that was getting ported.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I think that is a great point to leave it for whatever this is going to be. I don't know if this is going to be like Back in My Play Hangouts or what, but this was a ton of fun. It allowed me to do another interview, which I'm really having a blast doing. So before we do go, if you're watching this live or really soon, you can still go to Teespring. Let me just make sure I have this link correct. Teespring.com/backofmyplayportable to pick up a portable version of our logo on a really comfortable T-shirt for about $16. And as always, you can check us out at Back of My Play and subscribe on iTunes. We got a really interesting review on iTunes that I think this is just some great internet stuff. I don't know if you ever read the reviews for Player One podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I never tried to for any of my podcasting stuff, just because you always have the interesting reviews on there. But I just wanted to give this guy a shout out because it really stood out to me. But he said the review is titled "Good Music. These guys remember every detail. Games." This is word for word. These guys remember every detail games they played when they were infants. good research and music, but I can't believe the rest. What are you talking about? What can you not believe? It says good research and music, but he doesn't believe I guess he doesn't believe the stories that I'm totally making up everything I say on the podcast, I guess. But that's for Retro Digital. I hope you're still listening, and I promise you this is 100% true. You can vet it if you want. I will be willing to back anything that I can up with witnesses that were also around at the time, but I don't think many people gave a crap about video games as much as I did when I was a kid, at least the people that were around me. So, Greg, where can people check you out? Obviously, they can follow you on Twitter, and you guys are at P1 Podcast for the Player One Podcast.
Yeah, and my personal Twitter account is at Sewart, Sewart. You can hear our weekly show, the Player One Podcast, which is at player1podcast.com. And for Generation 16, you can I have my own website now for that, so it's generation-16.com. You can find links to the 11 episodes that exist so far, as well as semi-regular updates on the how the 12th episode is doing, which is taking a little longer than I'd hoped, but it's turning out to be probably the biggest episode I've done so far. So come check it out. I really would love to hear some feedback, and hope that you enjoy what you see.
Yeah, absolutely. Give them a look if you're into Sega Genesis or Sega in general. If you are late to the party when it comes to the Genesis, it's going to be just bad because you're going to start going on eBay like I do every time I see an episode and be like, oh, I don't know what that game is. Let me see how much. Oh, it's only like $10 on eBay. Of course I'm going to buy it because Genesis stuff is still really cheap.
Yep.
And also, it's great that you put the time and the effort into it, so they're really well produced. So definitely give them a look, and definitely they get my thumbs up, my back in my play, recommendation, seal of approval, whatever. So
thanks.
Definitely, yeah, give that stuff a look. And Greg's going to be back on soon to be talking about Metal Storm a week after this upcoming week. So we're going to have to do back-to-back Nintendo. But this means that you're going to have something to say about Nintendo and not just Sega this week.
That's going to be awesome.
Hopefully you're going to actually know this game, unlike CJ. You guys keep giving him crap for that, man.
The game's hard though, man. I'm trying to play it, and I'm like, man, I need some codes or something to get through this, because
you do need codes. You need it's too far away, but I have my Game Genie.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna do the same.
Use it. It's what I would have used. Why not?
Yeah, absolutely.
I will document the usage of the Game Genie as well. So, Greg, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you to everyone that joined us and for submitting questions. Hopefully this is just the beginning of kind of a trend, maybe once every other week thing, just to do a follow-up with someone that wasn't on the show, or to go a little bit more in-depth into the history of a specific game, or maybe just to talk to great people like Greg. So, again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Greg, and have a good night. We will see you next time.
Thank you.